And without further ado, I'd really like to dive in and first really talk about Dover Youth to Youth. So I've mentioned now a few times that I have been with Dover Youth to Youth since I was 12. So that puts me at around 12 years with the program. Again, talking from a youth perspective for most of those years, and today from the adult perspective and as a consultant as well. So, Dover Youth to Youth is a large youth empowerment program based in Dover, New Hampshire. And we are right on the seacoast of New Hampshire, and that's where I grew up. And really, what this group does is take action in the community on substance use prevention efforts. And we really do this in four key ways. So, first, that is through education. So, when we're thinking about projects that we take action in that are education based, we're thinking typically presentations. So, today would count as one of those efforts, educating both the prevention community, so other youth advocates, advisors, or future advisors, as well as educating the community. We do classroom style presentations, which you're seeing pictures of here, as well as larger assemblies and even conferences as well. So I did my first presentation to a large assembly like this when I was in the seventh grade. And actually, this is a picture of it now. This was my first large assembly photo. Uh, you can barely see me. I'm standing behind the guy in the green sweatshirt. But one of the reasons why I brought this picture in today is because it's a great reminder that no matter the skill level that your youth are at now, they can eventually overcome anything. Personal story, really quickly before we keep going. When I was in the fifth grade, prior to starting this program, I was an incredibly anxious public speaker and was giving a book report in my classroom, which was probably 30, 32 students in the fifth grade. And I passed out because I was so anxious to present in front of an audience. So if you're thinking, oh, some of my students can relate to that, know that this program, this youth empowerment model that we're going to be talking about today, also addresses how to really strengthen the confidence in those students so that they can take action through education projects or so they can take action through the media. So in Dover Youth to Youth, we both produce, we write, create, and produce radio and video PSAs or public service announcements. We've had them play on our local ABC channel. We've had them play on our local uh, radio stations. And this is actually the area that Dover Youth to Youth is probably most well known for. And then, most importantly, and an area that I'm really going to highlight today, is we also take action through policy change. So, through policy change, we're talking primarily about city ordinances, which are just laws that pertain to a single city or town, and also state laws. Within Youth to Youth, we have successfully passed three state laws and seven city ordinances. And that's over the span of about 30 years. But again, this is another way that you can really engage your youth when you are having a youth empowerment program. Next, we also do action projects or community awareness projects. I heard from Eric that a lot of you are probably partaking in similar projects to this, but Youth to Youth also does projects that are a little smaller, like Sticker Shock. And we also do community awareness projects that focus on changing really the environment of our community. And an example of one of these larger community awareness projects is our Citgo gas station or Citgo advertising project. So, the Citgo gas station is a gas station for us that is located next to three of our schools out of five of our schools. In Dover, we have three elementary schools, It's next to one of those, our middle school and our high school. And so kids every single day, whether they were walking to and from school, biking, driving, or on the bus, they were being exposed to a plethora of tobacco advertisements that were truly plastering this gas station. So we counted a total of 15 tobacco advertisements. And our students, who were really well trained as advocates and as activists, saw this as a huge issue and something that they personally really wanted to tackle. So we brought them through the advocacy process. We, as you can see here, documented this really well. And then we had our students draft up a letter. And three of our students practiced both delivering and answering questions about this content to the store owner. And after they did that, it turned out that the store owner himself had two students who were actively in one of those schools that was near this gas station and just didn't realize that this was a problem. And he agreed to take down the advertisements, and literally the very next day, this is what the gas station looked like. And so we were bringing awareness to that store owner that this was a concern and a problem. And we were able to, again, have a direct impact on the environment in which we were living in our community. And so those are the four areas of action that we really focus on. And now I have a quick question for you all so that I become a little more familiar with what kind of projects you are working on. And I'm curious, when you are taking youth advocates out, what kind of action areas are you focusing on? Education, media, community awareness, policy change, all of the above, or some combination of those? So I will have awesome, and that poll is up for you now. So it looks like, as of right now, education is in the lead, followed very closely by community awareness. And again, we'll launch this poll in a moment, but a good variety of projects. All right, it looks like a number of people have entered into this poll. So I'm going to end it now and share the results. So it looks like a lot of you focusing on really these community awareness activities as well as education. Some of you are working on media, and some of you are even working on policy change. So all of these efforts, again, as we know, as prevention specialists, are part of the puzzle when preventing and reducing substance use harm in our community. But there are areas that are really well and truly effective. And we know policy change is one of those areas. And today I'll really be talking about, how do we get our youth there? How do we get our youth confident enough to actually be impacting their own community or state in that way? So, we will be discussing the youth empowerment model. But before we jump into what that model looks like, I want to get some clarity on a few terms that we commonly hear in this space. So, the first one is youth tokenism. So, when we're referring to youth tokenism, you can think of it as window dressing. Think when an adult coalition brings on or has one or two representatives that are from the youth sector, and during meetings, those youth are often just sitting there. So, youth tokenism is used very frequently, and it's really a passive way of getting youth involved in different projects. And oftentimes, when we think about youth tokenism, we're also thinking about youth being maybe a little bored during some of those meetings. and we're not using them to the full capacity. So, again, that's youth tokenism. They're there as window dressing. The next term that we'll often hear is youth involvement. When we are talking about youth involvement today, we are talking about youth who are simply committed to a task. So, this is a task oriented way of engaging youth. So, in this scenario, we have an adult coalition coming together. And instead of just having those representatives sitting on their board, this time that adult coalition wants to mail out information about underage drinking to every parent in that community, and they need help stuffing envelopes. And so you invite in maybe 5, 10 kids, and they come in and they're there to stuff envelopes. Maybe you play some music, maybe you have some pizza, but they don't really understand the materials that they're handing out. And they're simply there to stuff envelopes and they're committed to that task. Then that's what we consider youth involvement. Next is youth engagement. So, in that same scenario, again, we have an adult coalition mailing information out to parents in the community about underage drinking, except this time, as the youth are stuffing those envelopes with that information, you have provided some education to them, and they are excited about this information that they're sending to parents and understand the impacts that underage drinking has. That would be youth engagement. So, again, instead of just doing a task, they're doing that task with the ultimate understanding of what the mission is, which in this example would be reducing underage drinking. And then what we are striving for and what we are going to talk about today is youth empowerment. And when we are talking about youth empowerment, we are talking about young people who have the capacity to change their environment. And a great example of that would be with the Sicko gas station project that we just talked about. They identified a problem, they knew what steps they needed to take with some guidance, but ultimately got their physical environment changed because of that. So, how do we get there? How do we get from youth who are maybe really passionate about a mission, right? I'm sure many of you have a lot of really passionate young students who are ready to do some work. And you're probably wondering, how do I get them to this next level? How can I make sure they're being effective communicators? And the model that we use, that is an evidence based model, we went through the Service to Science grant in New Hampshire and are listed as an evidence based practice. And this is really the foundation of what we teach, which is knowledge, skills, action. So when we are talking about this model, I now want to take just another minute to define some of these terms. I promise today will be more about just defining terms, but just to lay that foundation, when we're thinking about a youth empowerment program, we're also thinking about the difference between an intramural basketball team and a varsity basketball team. So, in this sort of analogy, we have two groups of students, and both of them are playing basketball to varying degrees, right? In the intramural group, they're still very engaged, they're having fun, they're really, it's a great after school activity, right? With this intramural basketball league. But these students are probably playing a lot of game time, right? They're shooting basketballs all the time with friends. So the vigor to which the intramural students are working is likely different from what the varsity basketball students are working. And we're thinking about a youth empowerment program. We're really thinking about the varsity level basketball team. We're thinking they are practicing and rehearsing for hours for just a few minutes of game time, right? So with varsity basketball, they're running drills, they have a really foundational knowledge of the sport. They probably know specific routes that they're going to take and have that planning and preparation. Versus, again, intramural basketball, it's a great way to engage youth, and there's nothing wrong with intramural basketball. But again, those different levels are what we're referring to, the difference between really that youth engagement and the youth empowerment model is that key differential, is that planning, preparation for that really, really targeted amount of game time. And so, again, here are some just few talking points about those intramural sports and then how they're different. Again, when we're thinking about varsity level sports, we're really thinking about knowledge and skills prior to taking action. And the same thing goes for the youth empowerment model. And when we're referring to knowledge, we're really thinking about a command of the topic, an expertise, a level of understanding that is truly has depth, right? So when we're talking about really what type of knowledge is needed for a project, it's going to depend. But generally, we know that they're going to need basic statistics, whether those are national, statewide, or local statistics. They have to have some familiarity with that, and they should be able to recite the most important ones. With knowledge, we're also thinking about educating our students on sort of these foundational pieces. So, one that we really focus on in our program is media literacy. So, having an understanding of how media is developed, how it's communicated to the public, and also how we can create effective media. So that is one piece of it. And within that would be things like advertising patterns and how has pop culture been used and influenced drug and substance use, as well as depending on the project, they likely need to know how to work with the press or actually go through the process of creating policy change. So, within this example, when we're thinking about conducting an underage drinking program, and this is something that we do within our students as well. We focus primarily on alcohol, tobacco, and then we do have a CARA grant, which focuses on really fentanyl and opioid overdoses. But we're thinking about developing the knowledge on consequence, the knowledge on impact. So, how is this affecting our young people? Knowledge on how it's being regulated throughout our state. And then, most importantly, and again, in our group, we really focus on what are these industry level practices? What is their history of advertising to young people? How are they currently promoting that within our community? And lastly, we always make sure that our students are up to date on current events. So that they can really have adult level conversations with people. When we send our kids out to the public, we never want to hear, oh, that was really good for a bunch of kids. We want them to be so well versed that it truly sounds like an adult level conversation. So, how do you develop this knowledge? Well, one thing we really like to focus on in our group is learning through engaging. So, yes, you can use fact sheets, you can bring in guest speakers, you could play a video, you could have a lecturer, or you yourself could lecture about the topic. But what we know works best, at least for our students, is playing games and really, again, engaging with that information in a fun way. And so, one example of how we develop knowledge within our students about sort of the brain science when it comes to alcohol is through the brain game. And so, we have two of our students usually wearing a helmet with the brain, and we have two students standing behind them. They are handed a consequence of alcohol. So, for instance, alcohol poisoning. And then they would be challenged to as quickly as possible, place that piece, that consequence on the correct part of the brain that correlates with that consequence. So, for instance, again, if it said alcohol poisoning, they would put that on the brainstem because that is the area of the brain that is being most affected when someone is suffering from alcohol poisoning. And again, the students love it when we break out this game, especially when they're learning, because it makes it fun. So, this is really a challenge for us as adult advisors and as mentors for these students to make sure that we're not just talking at them, but truly engaging them in a way that makes them want to stick in the program.
And Isabel, I have a quick question for you
Yeah.
on that. I mean, we're talking about alcohol right now. We have a lot of folks on this call that are also, they work under contracts that also have them work on cannabis, opioids, and even methamphetamine. But I'm assuming based on the age level, with your youth, are you pretty much focusing on alcohol and cannabis? Do you broaden it? What is appropriate in your point of view on that?
Yeah, so in our group, we do a little bit of everything in terms of substance. We are specific to substance use, though. So while we may tie in components of mental health throughout our campaign, we always have that tie back to substance use and how substance use is affecting mental health or how mental health is affecting substance use. But we start our students off really young. We start in the sixth grade, and in the sixth grade, they learn about tobacco, alcohol, opioids, and we are still developing resources on cannabis, but we do train our youth advocates with cannabis knowledge. We do not take action yet in the cannabis space. Otherwise, unless you're testifying against legalization in the state of New Hampshire, because we are still one of the about 25 states who have not legalized yet. So we, yeah, we do everything across the gambit. Um, some of the topics that are more sensitive, things like sexual assault and rape, is something that we start talking about primarily with our eighth graders. But depending on the maturity level of the group, which will vary for everyone, we do start talking about that seventh grade, eighth grade, so they become well versed on it when they are in high school and can talk about that accurately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And feel free throughout today if you have questions or things you want to hear more about or have another explanation, feel free to put that in the chat or raise your hand. Happy to also have like a break of just hearing my voice today as well. Otherwise, we'll do a larger questions session at the end of this as well. So, again, that was really step one, developing knowledge. Step two is developing skills. So, again, and I really want to hone in on this today, whenever we have our students take action, we never want to hear, wow, that was great for a bunch of kids. So, we want them to have the knowledge and skills that are at par with or greater than the average adult. And so when it comes to skills, we're thinking presentation skills, we're thinking media production, activism, writing, leadership, theatrical skills of sort of acting and how to create emotion through your voice. All of this is vitally important to the success of a program. And again, skill building should be the foundation of your program. Going back to that varsity example, in our program, we have our students meeting for 2 hours per week. And then when they're prepping for something, let's say they're about to present to a group of legislators, they will come in for 3, 4, sometimes 5 additional hours of training over the span of a month while still meeting those 2 hours a week. So we are training and drilling every single piece of it. So that way, when they're going up before an audience and before the public, they feel confident knowing that they can successfully do this. And again, it's always knowledge and skills before we even think about taking action. And really, when you develop knowledge and skills together, your students will also be able to sort of inform what type of action you're taking. So instead of it all being adult led, when you use this model, you are empowering your students to have a voice because they are understanding the problem and are able to identify ways to impact the community through this change. So, again, sticker shock is something that we do within our program. And this is a great example of taking action. However, when we do something like sticker shock, we consider this a stepping stone project. So, again, we start our students off in the sixth grade, and this is one of the first activities they will do. Why do we do this first? Well, after they are trained on the knowledge and skills to be able to take action in this way, we have them practice answering questions to pedestrians or customers who are walking around the store. And by doing this very, very low risk project, we're building their confidence, right? So they practice their message. And in this instance, they have adults surrounding them. Anytime we do this project, we bring two older high school students, an adult advisor for around five or six sixth graders. And so if a customer walks up to one of the students who's stickering, an adult or one of our very trained youth, we call them youth staff, will be there next to the student, hear what the customer is asking, and be there for support if they need it. But if the students do well at answering it, they will not step in. So, this is a low risk way, again, of building confidence. But sticker shock is not ultimately where we stop. Anytime we're doing sticker shock, we're also doing environmental scans. We're also thinking about what type of products and where are promotions being advertised. So, as you're thinking about really planning for not only the next 6 months, but really the next few years, consider how you can integrate more evidence based practices into your prevention program. So, we do training for that. And the training for a project like sticker shock, again, we still train knowledge and skills, but it's not nearly as intense as what our older students do when they are actually going up and testifying. So maybe 5 hours of preparation, 10 hours of preparation for sticker shock. And once our youth are trained in those foundational skills, that is when we start building on some of these more advanced concepts like policy change. So, quick poll, because whenever we are thinking about taking action and really developing skills, uh, we ourselves as adults have to feel comfortable coaching these skills to students. So I'm curious, one, what skills do you already feel comfortable coaching your students in? And then secondarily, what type of skills do you want to develop to become a more effective coach, mentor, leader within your organization when you're guiding youth? Awesome. So, sort of narrating this as this comes in, it looks like many of you are feeling well versed in presentation skills, some of you in media development skills, and it looks like a lot of you want to enhance your graphic design skills. And it looks like we have a hand raised, Gabriel. I am going to let you speak. Give me one moment. I have to open up this again. All right, you should be able to talk now, Gabriel, and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Isabella. It's a wonderful presentation, and thank you for providing the presentation to us. The question that I have is, I know you said you work with sixth graders, and then you kind of develop their skills and kind of, I guess, get them ready for policy, is what it looks like at some point. Um, I wanted to know how what how are you going about selecting these students if they are in sixth grade? Or how are you getting students that are interested? And how
Yeah,
are you keeping them interested?
that is a great question. And we will talk about this a little more, but to answer your question now, we do a few things. One, when we're starting in the sixth grade, we're actually starting them a little before that. So, the end of their fifth grade year, which for us, the fifth grade is the start of middle school, a little different community to community, I understand, but fifth grade, they start middle school. They are given a presentation at the end of the year. It's called the History of Lies presentation, and it is about how the tobacco industry has continued to lie for decades about their products and about how they are manipulating their customers to just gain profit. And it is very much a counter advertising based presentation that really focuses on enhancing media literacy skills. And one thing that we know is really effective with our students and with young people in general is it's good to have someone to hate. And we know that counter advertising is a really effective strategy, a communication strategy to targeting that population. That's why the Truth campaign was so successful, and it's something that we like to highlight in our program. So, fifth grade, they get that presentation. At the end of the presentation, we make a pitch. We say, hey, if you are interested in challenging the tobacco industry, you should join our group. And then we go through all of the different types of activities that we do in our program. That presentation that I did at the beginning with like the 4 areas of action that we take, they give examples of each of those. And then they say, and better yet, instead of starting next school year, we have a summer program during the summer. And I realize that the summer program will not be realistic for every coalition, but we treat that as our advocacy boot camp. And they learn presentation skills, media development, basic advocacy skills, all within 4 days of training. And they do 5 different action projects during that time. They record a radio PSA, they perform a skit, they go out and do sticker shock, and this all culminates into a rally on Thursday. And then Friday, we take them to do a fun activity at a water park. So, how do we get them to come? Is we do broad recruitment. We pitch it to them and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Secondarily, we also do targeted recruitment. So we have really great relationships with our schools, including guidance counselors, teachers, administrators, who are able to say, this student is struggling, or this student uh, really loves theater, but our theater program in our school is really popular. And oftentimes, kids don't get a part in every single musical that we offer. And so they'll say, hey, there's this group that's doing a lot of theatrical presentations. I think you'd like it. Why don't I connect you with them? So it is dual pronged in that way that we do what broad net recruitment as well as targeted recruitment. We also have our students bring their friends to meetings if they want. Um, I was pulled in through friends, and if you're creating an environment that is a safe space where kids can not only hang out but engage in a meaningful way, then you're more likely to have them stick around. So it needs to be fun. We always say, have food around because students love food and will likely be hungry if you're offering something after school or at night because they're busy people. And then the most important way of how we can get our youth to really stick around in this space is when we plan our meetings to be youth centric. So that means you likely have multiple projects going on so that all the youth can be engaged in a meaningful way, so that someone's not sitting on their phone scrolling on TikTok. Instead, offering every single person something to do that's fun and exciting for them. And that will look different based on your coalition. That was a really long-winded answer, and we'll talk more about that in a moment as well, but I hope that answered generally what you were asking.
No, it did. Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you, Gabriel. And
And
I
John Byram, I've unmuted you if you wanted to ask that question.
thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Great. On the slide before, you had in those articles,
Mhm.
you had one that said safer cigarettes.
Yeah,
Campaign for safer cigarettes. I don't know of any safe ones.
um, this particular article has a very, deceiving title. We were focusing on a flavor ban in New Hampshire, and also this was before my time. This was 19 based on I see Emily's in this picture, this would be 1999 or 2000 when this happened. We were also had a couple of fires that were started from tobacco products in our community. And so I think this had something to do with safer like um uh, ig- uh
Auto extinguishing.
auto extinguishing. Thank you for filling that in for me. Yes.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
But I will also dig into that because I did not realize that's what the headline was, and that's a very good question. So I'll follow up and send whatever story I find to Eric so he can pass it along.
Well, and I think it's a good question from John. I think it's also
Yeah,
speaks to the media literacy and media advocacy because you could create, a really focused media campaign and then you never know what the headline's going to be
yep.
from the reporter. It could be completely different from what you tried to put together. And so it can be challenging, but good catch on that, John. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, moving right along to best practices. So, the question that we got earlier about really how do we get students to join and how do we keep them there? We're going to go over this in a little more detail now, but generally, what we recommend, and again, not every coalition will be able to do this every single time, and we totally recognize that. But what we found is if you can have two advisors, you are far more likely to be successful. Why is that? Well, people get sick, people have children, people get busy, people switch jobs. And so, if you have two advisors or two people on staff who are helping run this organization, then you are likely going to have at least one of those advisors at any given meeting who can be present, A. B, if someone leaves, it creates a really seamless transition so that the students don't have to get familiar to two new faces. They're just getting familiar to one new face and they don't have to learn all of the processes over again. So, again, that sustainability piece for an organization is often kept when they have two advisors. So, that is a negotiable, but again, really strongly recommended. The rest of these are non-negotiables. These are things that we recommend to every single coalition, and I'll sort of talk about why each of them are important. The first and foremost is an application form, and happy to send this along, although you feel free to put in the chat, do all of you have a standard application form that you use with your students? And I'll keep my eye out for that while I'm explaining this, but Application form does a few things. One, it allows you to get updated contact information for the students, the parent slash guardian, and anyone else who's going to be important. It's a safety feature as well because you add in what are the students allergic to? Do they have an EpiPen that we need to be aware of? So it is a chance for the parent or caregiver to communicate to you about their student. And we keep all of ours in a binder on hand. And whenever we travel, we take the students' application forms out, as well as we have a travel waiver as well, but take those out, photocopy them, and bring it with us. So again, we have everything on hand and it's not a rush to get everything at the very end. Second reason why application forms are so important. And Gabriel, it looks like you use an application form. Kudos to you. Excellent. Uh, One thing, if you don't have it already, that we recommend putting in your application form is a media release form. We have a series of sort of waivers that parents will sign as part of their application into the program. So this means that prior to even joining the program, we are getting parental consent to take and share photographs of their student. So that way, when we're putting together a presentation like this today, every single student that you've seen on this presentation gave parental consent for their student to be photographed and for those photographs to be shared broadly. Also, radio PSAs, video PSAs for us are all encapsulated in that. So that is really my pitch for you to have an application form. Again, I'm happy to pass along. We have a standard template that we share with folks that has our media release waiver attached to it as well. And it's totally customizable. So you can add your coalition name, all of that stuff. And I'll send that to Eric as a follow up so he can share it out. Eric and Hannah. So after you've done the application form, the next thing you should do the following day, the following week, is develop an email distribution list. Email distribution list should be used frequently and consistently. So we create a distribution list for each of our teams. We have a total of 4 teams, each meet on a different day of the week slash time frame. We split ours up by age group. And so not only are the students involved in this distribution list, both parents or multiple caregivers or guardians, whoever they list on that application form, get added to that distribution list. Every single person. Grandmothers on the application form because they're frequently responsible for taking care of the children, grandfather, step parent, an older sibling who's substantially older who takes care of the sibling on a regular basis. All of them are added. So that way, when you are communicating about sort of action planning for the week, everyone gets that email, including the parents who we know, particularly for our young students, are often setting their schedules. We also do this for our high schoolers. We have a lot of forgetful high schoolers in our program, and the parents can poke them and be like, hey, remember, after school today, you said you were going to help with the younger students. Make sure you go after school and get transportation to get there. And we provide transportation, but make sure you hop on the van to get there. So those are things we do both during and before we start our meetings. I'm going to skip the sustained recruitment for right now, but I'll come back to it in a second and just summarize what we talked about earlier. But next, whenever we are meeting, we meet consistently. That means without a doubt, the parents and the students know that every Monday after school, I am going to be part of this club from September through May. Every Wednesday, this is what I'm doing. And because it's consistent, we have fewer students who are missing meetings. And totally agree, John. Yes, texting, another great resource. Slack is another great one to involve as well. Um, we still encourage, if you have a text group chat, also including the parents as well. You can text students one-on-one if you have permission to do that as well, but highly, highly recommend in communicating with the parents too. Um, and then the parents know the student always has this on this day. We will not plan anything for Wednesdays after school. How we communicate to our students about this is right off the bat, they know we meet every week. We communicate clearly, this is where we will pick you up, or this is where your parents will drop you off, depending on the age group. This is the time, and we will always communicate well in advance if we are going to be canceling a meeting. Let's say there's a holiday like Labor Day. We probably wouldn't have a meeting during that day if that was happening. So, meeting consistently. Last but not least, the administrative practice that is associated with the greatest success is sustained recruitment. Throughout the entire, we do the bulk of our recruitment at the end of the 5th grade year, but we never stop accepting or inviting students to join. We have open communication again with our teachers. We have a diversion program through our police department, which Dover Youth is housed under. So the diversion program, open communication with some of our social workers who live in the city who are allowed to send sort of saying, hey, you may be interested in contacting this student. Same with guidance counselors. We never get, obviously, HIPAA still applies, so we're not getting diagnoses or anything, but what we are receiving is sort of that way of making contact with our students. Next, actually, when you are conducting meetings, it is so, so important to have multiple projects in the pipeline. Again, it should really be everyone has something to do. So during our meetings, we have 2-hour long meetings. Our first 30 minutes are usually students getting snacks, most important for them. Second, during those 30 minutes, everyone takes a seat. We kind of go over what projects are going on. This is also when we take some time to do a very small educational component, particularly with our older students. It will often be a newspaper article, and we'll pass it around. The staff will provide a brief summary of that, and then we'll open it up to discussion. What are your thoughts on X? And because they have those like foundational knowledge and skills, particularly with our older students, this is a really, really informed conversation. And we allow them to take a stance. The next thing is having a balance between advisor driven ideas and student driven ideas. At first, most of your ideas will be advisor driven. Until your students are well versed in those knowledge and skills, they likely won't be developing ideas, but it is so, so important that you are always open to that and you're creating an environment that's always asking them, are you interested in this? Do you want to do this? Does this sound lame to you? They will be honest and sometimes brutally so, but take that, if they are being brutally honest with you, as a positive. And again, really want to hone in on this. When we are engaging students, we always want to be thinking about these like stepping stone approaches. So maybe you're not leading with an evidence-based approach, but getting there through these smaller projects. So every student should feel confident and comfortable before they take action. And you build that comfortability by giving them smaller bite-sized projects. If you don't have some of these stepping stones and you're not doing new projects or inviting them into a space where they can be really driving some of these projects, you're likely going to have a dip in sort of the a dip in the number of students who are participating in your program. We know students are busy. For me personally, in high school, I was involved in, I don't know, like 10 clubs, some ridiculous number that looking back on it probably would never do again. But knowing this and knowing that a lot of your students are going to be incredibly driven and incredibly busy, it's important that you're introducing new and more fun and more fascinating things for them to do. So, by again stepping stoning it, by creating those levels, you are inviting them each and every meeting to push themselves. And again, how do we keep students around? Well, we create a community that has friends and that is friendly. So, again, that's really the responsibility of the advisor to create that environment, to make it fun, to play games, to sometimes relax. Um, Second is always ensuring, again, that every single person is engaged in a project and you don't have one person who's sitting in the back corner not doing anything. And then, last but not least, being open to hearing about students' personal relationship to this content. For me personally, both of my parents struggle with alcohol use, and I was not super open about it with friends and family ever. Um, but I was open to talking about it with my advisor. And of course, your school likely have protocols with what to do when when you are informed of something like this. And that's why you develop these relationships with guidance counselors or those points of contact in the school. But it is so vitally important that we make this relevant for them, whether that's something going on in their home life or what's going on in their school. Our students all the time would come in and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't use the bathroom because there are like 6 vape circles in every single stall." And then you ask, "Well, like, what's going on? How are the teachers reacting?" And typically they're really open about that. And that gives you insight to how you can make this more relevant to that age group as well.
And Isabel, I was going to jump in here again. I wanted to give you a chance to breathe here for a second.
Thank you.
So that last slide is also an opportunity because this is a collaboration where we want other people to weigh in. If any other folks have just some ideas that they want to share on what keeps youth engaged in the project, feel free to raise your hand if you're comfortable sharing that. We have a lot of folks that work with youth. So I'm just giving some folks an opportunity if they want to share what works on their end. And Gabriel, go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. I know one thing, we did a evaluation for our youth coalition, and one thing that they said was being able to speak in public. So we gave them the opportunity to go. We got accommodation this year for work that we were doing in the youth summit in the city of Santa Monica, and we had the students go and speak for that accommodation. And so I know that that's what they put in the actual evaluation. So I would say just encouraging folks on the call to let the students kind of lead certain activities. And so we let them lead that activity.
That's incredible, Gabriel, and congratulations. I know getting students and planning out transportation and who's going to be taking on what roles is really, really hard on the advisor perspective. So kudos to you and kudos to your students.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. Anyone else want to share what works for them in the engagement process and keeping youth around? All right. Well, we'll continue moving on, Isabel.
All right. So, next, we are going to talk a little bit about putting this all into perspective. And this is the emerging high risk alcohol products present or emerging high risk alcohol products campaign that Dover Youth to Youth is currently focusing on. And so we're really going to be taking the model that we just talked about, the knowledge, skills, action model of youth empowerment, and applying it to a campaign, A, and then integrating in how we implemented some of those best practices that we've talked about. And so, first of all, again, this is going to be a case study. So, this is just one example of one of the many projects that we do within Dover Youth to Youth. And this is called our Dress Up campaign. The tagline is, "Hey, Big Alcohol, dress up is for kids." And so when we're talking about a campaign, again, we are talking about a sustained effort that lasts more than a year. And always, it has consistent messaging. So it has talking points, it has sound bites that are refined, and it gets the message out to the community and even to a national audience in this case in many different ways. So prior to starting this campaign, again, our students became really well versed in industry advertising tactics. So they are very familiar with the history of the alcohol industry targeting youth with their advertisements. So they are familiar with Budweiser and Bud Lights, Halloween campaigns, and trick or treat campaigns that they've done in the past, which again, they have a very good understanding that this is a kids' holiday and they're making flimsy masks that are likely to be worn by kids. They're also familiar with how the alcohol industry has used cartoons within their advertising. They're very familiar with the historical Budman. And they're also very well versed in the types of toys that the alcohol industry has used to advertise their product. And again, this is from a historical perspective, but we also continually educate our students on what the alcohol industry is actively doing in the alcohol space. And little perspective on this project, at the time that I was working for Dover Youth to Youth, I had just graduated from my undergraduate degree in public health. Have always been really passionate about the substance use space. Obviously, was in youth to youth when I was younger, and really continued that passion with a professor of mine who worked in alcohol policy research and was living in Providence at the time, Providence, Rhode Island. And as I was walking around, I was noticing a ton of different products and advertisements within Rhode Island that were just absurd. And because I was in college, was exposed to a lot of people who were partying and would frequently ask, "Hey, roommate, what are you drinking when you're going to parties and stuff?" And had that very open conversation because I was personally curious in how the alcohol industry was really advertising some of these new products. And out of this, and from sort of, again, that youth perspective and coming into this adult space, I just became fascinated by some of these new products. Flash forward a few years after the pandemic, I started working for Youth to Youth, and at the same time, I was working for the US Alcohol Policy Alliance as their project manager. And I was working with some leading researchers and experts, and we decided that this was an issue. And I had been sort of recording things on social media, and we packaged this emerging high risk products as a sort of dual project between Dover Youth to Youth and the US Alcohol Policy Alliance. I had written the STOP Act grant that Dover Youth to Youth was applying for in 2022 to include an entire section that was dedicated to informing our community and tracking the Emerging High Risk Alcohol Products project within Dover and New Hampshire. So, from the advisor perspective, this was something that came from an advisor to the students. We asked our students before we put it in the STOP Act grant, we asked some of our older high school students, what do you think about this? And I'm about to show you a very similar presentation to what we gave them. And they immediately said, this is something I want to take action on. And so we developed a really refined presentation on this problem. And so we worked with some experts at the US Alcohol Policy Alliance to develop some basic broad definitions for what we were using within this campaign. So first, and this should be updated, I'm so sorry it's not, but emerging products are products that have come out in the past 4 years. So we're not referring back to products that had come out before that. So we're thinking about new products. The second term, high risk, are products that increase the likeliness for underage drinking or encourage people to drink a lot of alcohol at one time because their packaging is really deceiving for how much alcohol is in that product. So again, encouraging adult excessive drinking. We, as adult advisors and as part of my research project, split this up into a couple of key categories. Those categories were flavoring, packaging, healthy branding, caffeine, co-branding, and edible sweet products. So we gave this presentation to our students. So I, as an adult advisor, was educating them on this problem. And this is very similar to how we would go through it with them. We'd say, and now we know what the alcohol industry has done in the past. Today, they're continuing to market to kids through their flavorings. And their flavorings make these products incredibly attractive to youth. For instance, Bud Light came out with these sour seltzers, which you can see here, which are very reminiscent in the way they are packaged and the way they are advertised to Warheads, which again is something that is very youthful. It's a candy that's handed out at Halloween. And also, just generally, they use fruity flavorings within their new products. And again, here's that example of more fruity flavors. And some of these companies are even owned by soda companies as well. So that's our first problem with a lot of these new products is their flavorings. The second is how they're packaging them. And they're packaging them in a way that is attractive to students. And I'd like to note, this is a very condensed version of what we would show the students. We have over 100 slide PowerPoint deck with every single product that we've tracked so far. So again, the problem with packaging being attractive to youth is that it makes the product seem less dangerous and is likely to start initiation at a younger age. So UNH beer, which is the University of New Hampshire, most college students at UNH are under the age of 21, something that we highlight in our data as well. And so most people who attend the UNH football games will not be able to drink this, yet they are putting their logo all over it. The most egregious one is this Finding Nipa, which is a play on Finding Nemo. And here on the side, it says, how many clownfish can you find? And this particular product was added in after we showed our initial presentation to the students. And the students saw this in the store, and they're the ones who said, oh my gosh, how many clownfish can you find? They saw that and said, wow, that's something that you'd see on sort of those placemats that they give kids. And so, because again, they had that prior knowledge and the skill of really evaluating media, they were able to identify this. Another one that we're concerned about for packaging is Bake Sale. Again, looks just like a cookie, very modern, very young. The alcohol industry also makes their products look healthy now, and that's another one of our huge concerns. And so we educated them on Vizzy hard seltzers, and again, really highlighting the fact that when an industry highlights what they're putting in a product right on the front, it's likely going to be a little deceiving, right? They're saying only 100 calories per can. It has vitamin C, antioxidants. So they're trying to make a product that has a known carcinogen in it. Ethanol is a known carcinogen, classified in the same rank as tobacco products. They're classifying it as healthy. And we went through the lawsuit with them. So this has been continuously updated. Uh, and Molson Coors was actually ordered to remove some of those terms from their labeling because it was deceiving. Again, other companies are putting naturally green, gluten-free, or brewed with green tea, or even it being a hard kombucha product makes it seem healthy. We go through with our students sort of the history of caffeinated beverages being added to, or caffeine being added to alcohol, with the example of Four Loko. And for today, I am going to fly through some of these particular sides because I want to make sure we have time for questions. Am I right in thinking that this ends at 3:30, Eric? Or uh, what?
Yeah.
Thank
We've
you.
got about 15 more minutes. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
So again, more products that are caffeinated. We're also concerned about co-branding. And again, this is really where our students are seeing some of these products, noticing a problem, and we educated them on this first. So today I have students coming to me all the time with sort of screenshots or pictures of products that they've seen. And again, this is particularly concerning because these companies that are really, really youthful, like Eggo, are now creating a product that is explicitly designed for not their age group, right? So they were able to see these products for what they were. Sunny D is another one, Simply Lemonade. Again, we could keep going, and this is not even half of what we've seen in the past. We also educate them on edible sweet products. Here are some examples: whipped cream that's made by Cardi
What
B,
is the thing called on sides of packages?
a warning label or a nutrition label. I'm going to keep going for now, but I will have some time at the very end. We're getting to the point where questions are going to be asked as well. We
And
also
as you go through these, Isabel, so when you talked about earlier, we were able to try to change some labeling, have them pull some of the misleading, statements. Is we the United States Alcohol Policy Alliance, or is this the
we as Dover Youth to Youth.
Dover Youth? Okay, great. Wow, that's incredible. Just by way of background too, some of the folks on this call will remember this way back in the day, years ago. San Diego County was part of a group that worked on Alco Pops and advertising around that. So there is some background on
Yeah.
that. But this is also, I know that you work also with the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance. These are things that can be brought to their attention too, because they are looking at advertising as a big component of their work.
Yes. And we'll kind of get to like the tie between right now. I'm just giving examples of what the students have done. And in a moment, I will talk a little bit about what we're sort of looking at the national level. And if you're not already, highly encourage you to join the Alcohol Action Network as well. That is a group of national coalitions, or a group of coalitions from the national perspective who come together bi-weekly to talk about this. And so after we educated our students on this issue, they were able to take action. So again, they developed the knowledge, we developed them on the skills, both throughout their youth to youth journey and in preparation for this. And in response, they've been able to write letters to the manufacturers of these products expressing their concerns. And for Sunny D, they actually did get a response back from Harvest Hill, which again is the manufacturing company that creates these products. And they said, these products, and I quote, were not designed for students, and their market share of Sunny D generally was primarily adults. And our students sort of created a response to that. So, again, we taught them about product placement and social media. I'm sorry I'm flying through these right at the end. And again, why they should be concerned about product placement, why they should be concerned about price. All of this culminated into an action project. So, when we had our summer program, that boot camp I was describing earlier, we had our students actually conduct some environmental scans to figure out what was in our community and how can we start thinking of this from an equity perspective. And so Dover is about 33,000 people population wise. Majority of those people are white. We're not, as a state, we're not very racially diverse, but we are fairly economically diverse, and we have a very large population of our youth within Dover, Portsmouth, Somersworth, and Rochester who identify as a sexual or gender minority. So we know there are disparities between these different communities in New Hampshire. And just to really highlight where New Hampshire falls economically from these other communities, we are upper middle. So Portsmouth, the median household income 78,000, Dover a little less at 74,000, but still relatively high compared to these other two communities, both Rochester and Somersworth, who land around 66 to 67,000. So before we took on this project, before we were doing environmental scans, we ourselves as staff had to educate ourselves on what this process would look like and develop a tool to really assess outlets. And so the US Alcohol Policy Alliance really helped with that. And again, we did this during our summer program. And while some of our younger students were doing sticker shock, our older students who were more experienced were conducting these environmental scans. Here are some pictures of what they saw. And again, just flying through this, I promise I will give all the slides and I'm happy to write a summary as well. For all of you here, if you're interested in conducting an environmental scan of your own, highly, highly encourage you to use the environmental scan tool that the US Alcohol Policy Alliance developed. I helped work on this project, and what we're trying to do is create a national repository of all of these products so that you have access to your data, A, first and foremost, but B, so we can start tracking this on a national level as well between communities and start really looking at the differences that we're observing between communities of how these are being advertised. And if you're interested in updating any of your presentations with modern examples of uh, products or how they've been promoted, so any type of advertisement, feel free to scan this QR code. I will also put links in a follow-up email as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in there really quick, just speaking on behalf of San Diego County. I would double check though. It's a uniform tool that uh, they did not really want us to mess with. So I would just double check with your folks in San Diego with your core if you wanted to modify it, just because speaking on behalf of our evaluator, they, want to make sure they have everything uniform. But thank you for bringing that up, Isabel.
Of course, and thank you for hopping in there. And again, we kicked this event off with our students. And again, it was really with the tagline, "Hey, Big Alcohol, dress up is for kids." We got great media coverage for this. The Boston Globe covered it, which we live about an hour north of Boston, pretty big paper in our area, and they gave us some great coverage. And I'm now going to kick it over to questions. And if there aren't a lot of questions, I will fill that in the last couple of minutes in with some additional stuff, but I want to make sure we have time for everyone. So, John, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, real quick, does your alcohol products have nutritional values on them? No.
Nope. Nope. Some it depends on the alcohol product. For instance, an alcohol product that is produced as if it were ice cream would have that sort of national requirement of including that. But for the most part, alcohol products at a national level are not mandated to have nutritional labels.
Right. Well, yeah, it's one way we find out that it is alcohol.
Yep. Other than they have the requirement of reporting the ABV of it, and I think there is the requirement that they put somewhere on their packaging contains alcohol, and then the ABV as well as the drink responsibly line is frequently used to provide coverage from liability. And then it looks like in the chat we have, thank you, I was not aware of some of these products. I will definitely send over our tool. I added one recently that came out just a few months ago. It was a Welch's, like the juice company slash the fruit snack company, new alcohol product as well. There are a ton of them. Does anyone else have?
There's also a question from Kelly McCormick, going back to youth activities. Do you have suggestions on where to find engaging games to do with youth? Do you come up with most of them on your own, such as the brain game?
We do come up with a number of them on our own, and this is sort of a I don't know what your funding looks like. Youth to Youth does have a toolkit. You're welcome to look on their website to look at pricing of that. I'm not sure where it's priced right now. Or reach out to Dover Youth to Youth directly, and that contains some ideas for how to develop some of these ideas. But primarily, I would say when I'm thinking about coming up with an engaging game for youth, I think about what would be fun for me. I am 23 now and love games. And we have a very large friend group who often will come up with ideas. And so I've used the PowerPoint game to sort of prep students on doing improv games, which is when you take a random stock photos, you stick them in PowerPoints, you write up a couple of topics, and these could even be alcohol related as well or substance use related. We came up with some funny ones at first, and we have our students develop them now, but then they're challenged to continue to present and integrate whatever comes up on the PowerPoint, and they're not allowed to look at the slides in advance. And it's a funny game, but it's really fun and really engaging for the students to develop their improv and presentation skills. Um, yeah, I can think more on that and come back to it. But I don't have any ideas right off the top of my head for a formula that we use to develop them. And it looks like we have a question from IPS Zoom.
I think that's you,
Nope,
David.
that is me. I'm sorry, I didn't change my name. Um, you talked about doing the improv and the theatrical stuff, and I wonder if you've partnered with any local theater groups to develop those. I know here in San Diego, offhand, that Diversionary Theater has a youth improv group and they actually go out and work with schools. So it might be an opportunity for folks to utilize some external resources that they hadn't thought about.
That is such a wonderful idea. We do not have a lot of theater groups in New Hampshire when we're about an hour away from Boston. So, unfortunately, we do not have resources like that. But that sounds like so much fun. And if you got a chance to do that and learn anything that's really interesting to do with students to help them develop some improv skills, please let me know. I'd love to integrate some really professional ones.
My other question is TikTok. Everyone's on TikTok these days, and I'm wondering if you've developed a strategy to utilize TikTok since it's kind of wonky, the interface of you have to be logged into the account, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. So when I was at Youth to Youth, we started thinking about social media strategy more broadly than just TikTok. So Instagram, paid Snapchat promotions, paid Facebook promotions, uh, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Think that about covers what we were going to do. Um, my position was only an interim position. We had some staffing, not issues, but staffing shortages within our office, and nobody really had the expertise to develop it. So we've been working now really to figure out how to best utilize that, and also really thinking about parental consent when using social media. What we do now and what we've considered doing is we create a lot of video PSAs and radio PSAs. And we started having our youth practice recording our pre-scripted scripts that they've written in the past, radio and video PSAs, and adapting them in that really shortened content format. We have some students who love doing that. We have not started posting any of those yet because we want to make sure whenever we do start our page that we have a consistent stream of content. So, if you have any advice for us on how to use TikTok more effectively, we'd love to hear it. But as of right now, we do not have a strategy that we are prepared to share yet because we're not sure if it will work.
Good questions. I know we are at our point. If you had any more questions, we could stay on here for a little longer. I do have one more for you, Isabel. How do you give students certificates after they participate in the group? If we have high school students that maybe are looking at college applications, do you do letter of recommendations? Can you share what you do on that?
We don't do certificates necessarily. At the end of every year, we do a recognition ceremony. It's a 3 hour long event. We invite all of the parents and all of the siblings to really come see what the students are doing. And because oftentimes, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, we don't always have really meaningful ways for the parents to engage with this content. So we do not do certificates. We do a recognition ceremony and we give out awards each year. The awards the awards are legitimate and can be added to a resume. We give out 3 awards per uh, for our 2 older groups per year. So, Youth Advocate of the Year, the Advisors Award, and um, Emerging Leader. And these 3 awards are all given based on statistics we keep about the students. We track attendance for every single meeting. We track number of additional hours the student has come in to work. We recognize number of projects completed, number of volunteer hours, all of these different things to help us make the final determination of who's getting these awards. So they do get awards, most of whom put them on their resume and college applications. The biggest thing that we do is every single student who is deciding to apply to college um, gets a letter of recommendation. For me, my letter of recommendation alone was 7 pages long. My advisor spent, I don't even know how long writing it. And because he had documented our involvement since the very beginning, every single trip we went on, all of the number of hours we've been committed to the program, he actually had all of the statistics in my letter of recommendation. So I don't remember what the number was, but it was like uh, Izabelle Wensley has dedicated X number of hours to this organization. In that time, she's traveled to 12 different states, provided more than 3 dozen national presentations presented at these conferences, uh, and also gave like some personal narrative about who I was as a person. And that is done for every single student. So we have about 10 or anywhere from 3 to 10 seniors a year who get that letter of recommendation. We also sit under our police department. The police department gives out multiple scholarships every year at that event. Most of the time, there's enough. We are a robust enough program to offer each student anywhere from $250 to $2,000 as a scholarship. And that is part of the award ceremony as well. Any other questions?
Thank you. Appreciate that.